Love Elevated TV. If you caught our last episode, I exposed the myth of Mr. Right and how waiting around for Mr. Right is keeping you single. Today, I want to take it a step further and talk about missed opportunities. How Mr. Perfect for you is passing you by as you wait for Mr. Perfect. If you're ready to talk about it, let's get into it. So remember that Love Elevated TV is for the mature Christian single. And I want to add that preface here because today we're going to be talking about situations, opportunities that we have passed up on. And it's going to cause us to have a level of discernment. It's going to expose a level of self-awareness. And it's going to shine a light on some areas for growth. And that may not be comfortable, but I want you to sit in those emotions as they come and determine where they're coming from. Determine if this is a negative emotion that is rising because you're hearing something about yourself or you're being faced with something about yourself that you have never faced before. Determine if it is a negative emotion that may be holding you captive to a way of doing life in love that has not served you. Determine if it is a negative emotion that can be used to position yourself for the love that God designed for you. And I'm challenging you in this way. I would never ask you to do something that I hadn't done myself. Because everything that I am going to discuss here, everything that I ever discuss on this channel here is something that I have either gone through myself or I have intimate information, intimate experience with someone else who has done the same thing or been through the same thing. So now that we got that out of the way, we're talking about missed opportunities in love. And if you're here, if you're over the age of 30, then you probably have a checklist of things that you desire in a mate. Raise your hand if you have a checklist of things that you have or you desire in a mate. Maybe you are being just a little bit too detailed about the types of things that you desire in a mate. And further along in this season, we're going to talk about what we desire versus what we need. But you may want to take some time and revisit that checklist to determine which of those things are really needs and which of those things are desires. And when we talk about kingdom relationships, which if you are here on this channel, it's because you desire a kingdom relationship. And the first thing that I want to discuss here is the purpose of kingdom relationships. Everybody is so excited about love and being in love and building a life together and going on trips together and raising a family. And we think that it's going to look like a Disney movie or a Hallmark movie. But the truth is really the opposite of that. Sometimes it can mimic a Hallmark movie, but sometimes love can be hard because there are three purposes for kingdom relationships. And so in the last video, we talked about how God created Adam and he saw that it was not good for man to be alone. And so he created Eve so that he would not be alone. And that established the foundation for companionship, for intimacy, and for partnership. And so the three purposes of a kingdom relationship is one, to be a reflection of God's love. So we know that our relationships are the mirrors of the love that God has for us. They are mirrors that reflect to us our strengths and our weaknesses. And they also reflect to us our opportunities for growth. So when we think about how the relationship that we will ultimately have, the relationship that God wants for us, how that is supposed to reflect the love that God has for us, we will look at this a little bit differently because we understand that the love that God has for us is an unconditional love, right? And I want to make sure that I put this caveat here. So when I say unconditional love, I don't mean that we should accept any form of abuse. Sometimes we have to love people from a distance. But what I do mean is that we don't have this list of, if you do this, then I'll love you. If you don't do this, then I won't love you. When you have decided that you're going to do life with someone, that relationship should reflect the love that God has for us. It should be a mirror of a reflection of God's love for us. People should be able to look at your partnership and see God's love for the world. Just this past weekend, I went to a wedding of a young lady that I have had the privilege to watch grow. I think that I probably met her when she was about 7 or 8 maybe, and she has grown into a beautiful, accomplished woman. And I sat there in this wedding, a nice, small, intimate wedding of about 50 guests, and I could feel the love in the room. I could feel the love that the couple had for each other, and I could feel the love that every one of us seated there, witnessing them promising to love each other, had for the couple as well. And it was a beautiful thing. And I know that people always say that they cry at weddings. I've never actually cried at a wedding until this past weekend, because I could feel the love, and I had the faith that this relationship was a kingdom relationship. And they wrote their own vows, and both of them in their own way talked about how their relationship was going to fulfill a purpose that God created them to fulfill on the earth. And it was such a beautiful thing to witness. So the first purpose of relationships, of kingdom relationships, we're not talking about just any relationships. This is Love Elevated TV. We're talking about kingdom relationships. So the first purpose of those relationships is to be a reflection of God's love. The second purpose of kingdom relationships is growth. So I talked about how relationships are all mirrors. They reflect our strengths, they reflect our weaknesses, they reflect our opportunities for growth. So your kingdom relationship is going to challenge you in ways that you never, ever imagined. And through those challenges, you are going to be able to learn patience. You're going to learn grace. You're going to learn forgiveness in a way that you have never even thought of. Today, I was preparing lunch for Honey, and he wanted tacos. And when I got ready to make the lunch, I was a little bit frustrated because the kitchen wasn't really ready for me to make lunch. He had been in the kitchen doing some things, and I walked in and I immediately got frustrated. And so I asked him if he had already fed the dog, and he said no. And the dog was taking a nap, and he was waiting for him to wake up to feed him. And so we prepare the dog's food. We cook his food. He eats organic food, and we prepare a week's amount at a time. We just meal prep for him. And Honey had been meal prepping this morning, and things were still there, right? And so I could feel myself getting frustrated because I'm thinking, if I'm going to be preparing lunch, then I shouldn't have to clean up before I prepare the lunch. Then I have to clean up after I prepare the lunch. That's just an hour and a half, 2 hours, when I could have just come in, quick and easy it is to make tacos, right? And just as soon as he said that the dog was napping, he was waiting for him to wake up, and I took a deep breath, and the dog woke up, and he started whining. It was time for him to eat. And so Honey got up, and he cleaned up all of the supplies and everything from when he had been fixing the food for the dog. He fed the dog, and he got out of the way so that I could do what I needed to do. But can I be honest with you and tell you that I really wanted to fuss a little bit in that moment? I wanted to fuss about why he hadn't cleaned up when he got done. I wanted to fuss about why the dog hadn't already been fed. You knew that I was coming in here to make lunch. I wanted to fuss, but I sat, and it was so interesting because I had just been going over my notes for this video, right? I had just been going over my notes, talking about God's purpose for relationships. I was talking about how you're going to be challenged in ways that you never even dreamed of challenging, but in that challenging, you're going to become a better version of yourself. You're going to become the version of yourself that God intended when he created you, right? And I could only chuckle to myself because I realized that this lesson that I am teaching here, I was getting to have a remedial lesson in the purpose of kingdom relationships to push us to grow. So as we talk about these missed opportunities in love, how waiting for Mr. Right has caused us to miss opportunities, I want you to reflect on any instances in your life where maybe you thought that a relationship wasn't the one for you or wasn't a good relationship for you, when it was really doing what it was supposed to do. It was pushing you to grow. And these purposes that I'm talking about for kingdom relationships don't just apply to romantic relationships. They apply to family, they apply to our relationship with friends, they apply to work relationships. Every relationship that we encounter has a purpose. And so the third purpose for kingdom relationships is to serve God together, to make God's kingdom on earth together. You should be sharpening one another. We talk a lot about being equally yoked, and I think that many of us really have a misunderstanding of what being equally yoked is. I talked about how relationships are mirrors and how they reflect our strengths and our weaknesses back to us. When you are in a kingdom relationship, your strength will be their strength, will be your weakness. That's what being equally yoked is. It means that you will balance each other in that way, but you will come together in order to fulfill God's purpose on the earth. Whatever that purpose is, if that is to be a reflection of God's love, if that is to grow together, if that is to create a business together, if that is to raise a family together, whatever God's purpose is, that is what this kingdom partnership is designed to do. So if you ever wonder about whether this relationship that you are entering in, if you have been in, if it is a kingdom relationship, then you want to reflect on those three things, the three purposes for them. Does it reflect God's love for us? Does it cause you to grow in areas that you need to grow in? And are you fulfilling God's purpose on the earth together? So if you've known me for any amount of time, if you're a friend of mine on Facebook, if you're in my Facebook group, or you have followed me for any amount of time, you may remember that I talked about how when Honey and I first met, I'd also met another guy right along the same time that I met Honey. Probably about 2 weeks before I met Honey, I had met someone else. And we had just been getting to know each other. And I'll never forget that the day that I met Honey, I was around the holidays and I was having dinner with a friend of mine, and Honey was there. And the whole time that I was there, I was on my phone texting with this other guy. You know how it is when you first meet someone and you're just all infatuated, and just the attention that you're getting, it makes you feel loved and wanted and needed. And so I spent most of that initial meeting with Honey, I was there, but I wasn't there. I was texting the other guy the whole time. And I became aware that Honey was interested in me. And we went out on a couple of dates. And I actually dated him and the other guy for about 2 months or so. And ultimately chose to enter into a relationship with the other guy. And I debated on whether I was going to share this tonight, but it is a perfect example of a missed opportunity, because that other guy was perfect on paper. We were closer in age. We had a lot of the same interests. He wanted more children. At that time, I wanted at least one more child. We got along so well. You know how it is when you first meet someone and you on the phone all time of night, and you experience something during the day, you think of them, you send them a quick text, and he looked like he could be the perfect guy for me. But how many of us know that looks can be deceiving? And some of the things that I thought pointed to him being Mr. Perfect really ended up being red flags, because at that time I didn't really feel safe to speak about how I really felt. And so this relationship we had, it was on and off for years, and it all came to a head one holiday season. I hadn't heard from him for a whole week, right? And this wasn't something out of the ordinary for us. Sometimes I just wouldn't hear from him for a week. He wouldn't return phone calls. He wouldn't initiate phone calls, and then he would just pop up like nothing happened. And sometimes I would talk about it and try to find out what was going on, and other times I didn't. I would be so happy to hear from him that I would just act like it never happened, right? But this time he called me. It was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was on his way back from his hometown. He had gone out of town for the holiday. He was on his way back, and actually he called me because he was driving back. It was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was tired, and he knew that I was a night owl, that I was probably up, or if I wasn't up, that if he called me, I would answer. And he called me, and I answered, but I didn't realize that he had called me earlier and I had gone out. It was actually Black Friday. I had gone out with a friend. We went out to eat. He was open 24 hours, so we went out to IHOP and we ate and just sat and talked. And there was a male friend. And so he said, he called you earlier and you didn't answer. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I had missed a call from you, but I went out shopping earlier. And he was like, well, that was at like, it's open. The mall is closed at that time. Well, I had gone out to eat, and he got upset. He got really upset. And I'm thinking to myself, how dare you? You have been gone for a week, haven't heard anything from you. How dare you be upset that I not be available to you when you decide to call? And we kind of, and when I think about it, I didn't really like the way he talked when he got upset. Like, his tone of voice was nothing that he actually said that was disrespectful, but his tone was pretty disrespectful. And ended up having words, and he hung up the phone on me, and then he texted me back and he said, you care, something like care of the girls or something like that. I was like, what the heck does that mean? And I called him back, and he had blocked me. My call went straight to voicemail. He had blocked me. And I'm sitting here thinking, that you have been gone for a week, missing. I didn't know what was going on. He told me he was going out of town, but he was on an island and there wasn't good reception. And I knew that from past experience, it even could be a lie, but I knew that from past experiences, whenever he went to his hometown, I would probably not hear from him for that span of time because it was not good reception. I feel stupid even repeating that because it's probably a lie. But had I known that he was going for holidays, I would not have expected to hear from him. But again, I hadn't heard from him for a week. And really, truly, I believe that the only reason he really called me was because he knew that I would answer. He needed some company on his way back. But he was really upset that I was not available to talk to him the first time he had called me that night, and that I had been out with a guy and blocked me. And I didn't hear from him for months. This was Black Friday. I didn't hear from him. I called every so often. I would call, and of course I went straight to voicemail. And I called and wished him a happy birthday a couple of months later and left a message. Again, I was still blocked. Left a message and he called me back. And it was just like, bye, without me hearing from him. And I said, well, do you talk about this? And he said, talk about how you could just go, let's just pick up where we left off. And I wasn't happy about that, but I was so glad to hear from him. I just kind of let, did recover from that. It was really kind of tired of, really, I felt like I was begging him to do things that he should have wanted to do. He should have wanted to have consistent communication with me. He should have wanted to a routine of how we spent our time together, and go out on dates and all of those things. It was just, and I understand now that, for me, he didn't make me a priority because he didn't want to. And I think about that, and Honey and I speak about that time often because, time. But I understand that no opportunity is ever wasted. God can redeem our time, right? And so now when I think back, I think of how that relationship, not during the relationship, but when the relationship finally ended, and I'll never forget that I had with him, because every spring I just wanted to date other people. And this was during the spring, and I had been seeing other people, and he knew, those people. And I would always talk to him about it. Like I would, hey, honey, babe, I'm going out with, or I probably wouldn't tell the person's name, but hey, babe, I'm going out, and I got a date tonight. I'm going out, and we're going wherever we want. And he would say, okay, well, let me leave. Give me a picture of what you're wearing. Let me know when you leave. And he had done that, because at least 2 years. Whenever the spring came around, I just told him I wanted a break. And so even during the times when we were on a break, we would still talk pretty regularly. And for a particular time, I had gone out, I told him that I was going out, and he got upset. And I'm thinking, why are you getting upset all of a sudden? Because we've always talked about when I went out with other men. You're not making the time. I don't believe that anybody doesn't have the time to do anything that they want to do. They'll make it a priority, right? And so he got upset, and we ended up having a very heated, and it was over. Neither one of us really said it was over, but I knew that would be the last time that I talked to him, and it was. And I remember sitting on the side of the bed and just feeling so lost, and so I didn't know what my next step should be. Because if you're anything like me, I've always wanted to be a wife. I've always been a wife. I've always known that I was a wife. And when I first did, I felt like a failure. I ever wanted to be married again for a really, really long. I said that I didn't want to be married again. I didn't know how I could redeem the time that I wasted. I didn't know. I was just lost for a really long time. And after that relationship ended, I took some time to really get clear about who I was. I had some time to get really clear about who I was, why I was that way, all of the experiences that had led me to that place that I was in that moment, and why I had shown up in relationships the way that I had up until then. And it wasn't not an easy process, but I took the time to determine all of those factors so that I could be clear about who I was. Because for so much of my adulthood, I placed my value and worth in people outside of myself. I gave them the power to determine what my value and my worth was. And that night, as I cried out to God, and I remember just saying to him, where is my husband? And I'm trying not to cry as I think about it, because I was just so desperate in that moment. Like, God, my husband, I know I'm a wife. Where is he? And God directed me to a passage of scripture that I'm sure that all of us are familiar with. When I saw it that night, I read it differently. And that passage was Proverbs 18:22. And it says that when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And when I read that, and I was like, wow, all the time, when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing, but he obtains favor from the Lord. So that means that the favor for my husband rests on my shoulders. And so it made me approach lover relationships so differently. It made me, now I had just gotten certified as a relationship coach after prodding from for several years. She kept telling me, you should be a relationship coach, because I was dating and I was just I was reliving recreating dating experience that I never had as an adult and as a teenager. And so that women in particular, that's not really encouraged to date, but that's so necessary because it develops in us. It is a personal development time where we learn what it is that we want and what we don't want, where we learn to communicate our needs, where we learn to resolve conflict, we learn grace, we learn forgiveness, we learn patience. All of that is so necessary for kingdom relationships. And that is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about Love Elevated with Arnitris. And I've expanded. It's no longer just for women, it's for men as well, because this is the relationship education that we have not gotten. But I spent that time learning who I was created to be. And so when Honey and I reconnected, I could understand that he was frustrated with me, because I think that he saw the woman that I am today when we met all of those years ago, but I was not her. I had to becoming, but I had to awaken to her. She had always been there the whole time. But I can tell you that the woman that I was when we first met would not have been patient when she got ready to go in to fix lunch if the kitchen wasn't clean. She probably would have said choice words and just been all over the place, and it just would have been a whole mess. But the time that I took to, even though I say that I took the scenic route, but I have gained so much wisdom during that time, that wisdom that helps during my consultations with my clients, with my coaching, and as I create products and services, it helps so much. So I say all of that to say that missed opportunities and blessings for us. And I want to challenge you to think back on an opportunity that you may have had. That Honey and I got another chance to do this, and I can only hope that he feels the same way. But when I was making the outline and going over the information for this video and understanding that even though he didn't look like what I thought the love for my life would look, it feels like the love for my life would feel. And that is more important. I spent years asking my ex to take me to a butterfly garden. I have this unhealthy obsession with butterflies. It was kind of hard for me to let go of that butterfly logo when I was rebranding to Love Elevated with Arnitris. But there's a butterfly garden, not here, not from Atlanta, here in Georgia, gardens, and I had been wanting to go to this butterfly garden, and I asked my ex to take me. He always said, I'm not going to no butterfly garden. You know, golf, we can go bowling, I'm not going to a butterfly garden. But when Honey and I reconnected, and most of the time he would have plans for us to go, and I kind of wanted to go to Calibre Gardens, and he said, well, cool, let's go next weekend. And it on how easy that was. I said I wanted to go to Butterfly Garden, and he said, okay, let's go. And I thought about, Arnitris, look at how much time you wasted trying to get someone to do something that they did not want to do, instead of getting with someone who wants to do it. And there isn't much that I ask Honey to do or for that he doesn't do willingly. And I could beat myself up for the time I wasted, or I could reflect on that time and think about all of the lessons that I have gained. And so what I want you to do is to reflect on your past relationships And determine where there were some missed opportunities. Determine where you were waiting for Mr. Perfect when there was a Mr. Perfect for you right in front of your face. And I don't want you to beat yourself up for it. But over the course of the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about how to identify when that person comes along. Okay? So much for joining me. I hope that you have gained some insight into why we need to stop waiting and start dating. And stick with me. I'm going to give you the tools to do that. If you are ready now, if you know, hey, Arnitris, it's me, I'm here. I'm ready to start dating and stop waiting. Check the description box below and join me for my masterclass. We're doing it on October the 28th. It is called Elevate Your Elevated Love, Designing the Relationship Brand That Attracts. And we are going to audit your past relationships, and we're going to extract the lessons from there. And that is going to be your roadmap to your Mr. Perfect for you or Mrs. Perfect for you. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. And until then, remember that when you elevate your love, you elevate your life. Now, that was a heavy conversation, wasn't it? How many opportunities have you missed out on because you were waiting for Mr. Perfect? Don't worry, we've all been there. But it's time to stop waiting and start living. Next episode, we're going to be discussing the real danger of idealism in Christian dating. You don't want to miss this, so make sure you're subscribed. If you're ready to stop waiting and start living, check out my masterclass linked in the description below. Let's elevate our love lives together.